So welcome all. It's a pleasure to meet all of you virtually, though, given the circumstances and the situation that we are living in this era. But I am sure it's going to be very soon get over with it, and then probably we'll all be back to our set of offices and workplaces where we have been operating all this while. So, but it's a pleasure to meet all of you. And just to give a quick introduction about myself, my name is Vineet Sinha. I am a director cybersecurity with organization, which is the largest payment network organization in the world, MasterCard. Uh, Today, I have picked up a very interesting topic for which I wanted to speak and I wanted to deliberate and discuss a little more in detail, because I think this is an area which is very, very prominent, and most of the CISOs, CIOs today even struggle to address some of these key important parameters. Given the environment that we have today, where the adversaries, their attack pattern, their methodologies are evolving every day. So it's very important for us to continuously measure the set of control environment that we are living in, to make sure that we are able to effectively handle the adversary which are there. Now, given the environment, if we have to look at our organization, how do we see that? Okay, given the set of digital transformation that have happened over the period of last couple of years, a lot of things have changed, right? And I think most of the organization today have evolved on the journey of cloud security, and then they are also doing a lot of other digital transformation, like of adopting AI, ML, robotic process automation, and a lot of other pieces for their organization. Now, it is becoming very challenging for an entity which is very, very critical in the overall digital transformation, which is the security function, right? And then to measure some of these security gaps, to ensure that the control that we are implementing are the best of the control, then we are remaining on top of it at all point of time. We need to understand the complexities of our organization first. Now, if I have to look at my organization or any other organization, I have to look from two different lenses. Consider your organization as a house, right? And then start looking them at the internal set of controls and the external set of controls. Okay, so you have to understand the internal environment first and the external environment. Now, when we talk about your external environment, you have so many different partners, like of your vendors, right? A lot of entities whom you would be seeking some kind of an API in order to fetch data or send data, right? A lot of service providers whom you will be seeking services from. You need to understand that, right? And how the connectivity, you have a lot of clients, you have a lot of partners whom you are connected with. Now you need to understand their set of environment, and because these connectivities are going to have with your infrastructure and your setup, you need to understand how these are getting connected. First of all, what kind of data that are getting transferred to your organization through these sources, and what may be the risk that may happen to your organization, right? The other piece which you also need to and because of this digital transformation, we have seen that we have also expanded our journey to the cloud. Now that's another entity which is again to be looked into, right? And then we have to look all of these pieces holistically, right? The third important piece, which is the internal side of your organization, you are doing a lot of things today in order to protect your organization. You're working on deploying a lot of these standards like ISO 27001, 22301, 31000, 27770, 27017. A lot of these standards that are being used today, OWASP for that matter. Now, how do we measure some of these? And that's the challenge that as a security organization, we all face day in, day out. Now let's take step-by-step approach in terms of understanding how you can actually overcome some of these issues, because these infrastructure are not only, or the environment that we have, not only have the complex infrastructure, the application systems, but a lot of other things like of your internal employees, their access to a lot of sensitive information, personal information, right? So it's important for us to understand the control environment, how that is also operating at the same time, not only at the physical and the physical side of the piece or the technical side of the piece, but also at the human centric side of the piece. So all of these have to be understood. Now let's take example of each of these and try to understand how some of these are evolving. Now, when you are connecting with some of the external entities, right? Uh, there are a lot of these connections which are through your APIs. You are connecting or you are forwarding the information to, let's say, their systems in terms of their internal consumption. So in, let's say, there are deliverables which are going sent from your system to their systems, which are going to be consumed as an internal input for their some of their systems. Now, the data flow that happens between the two entities, which is from the external to the internal to the external, is very important that we understand the data flow. Okay, so that's the first piece that as an organization we need to understand. Okay, what kind of data is being shared? What are the method through which we are sharing this data? Is it been sent through a FTP? Are we doing using some kind of a SFTP? Are these information going to be shared through an API route? Are these information being sent through an email route? Are these are just going to be sent through as an application to application connectivity? So a lot of these pieces needs to be understood. Now you need to measure. You need to measure the environment which is connecting the two entities. Okay. Now you have to use, there are various set of tools and applications which are there sitting, and as an organization we ourselves today deploy more than 45 to 50 odd solutions, right? And it becomes very difficult to be really abreast with the changing space, the correlation, the output which is coming up on from these application and system, the correlation becomes very, very difficult today, right? So you as an organization, you would like to understand how some of these pieces are interacting, right? And how what is the value that they are bringing to us. Okay, so when we talk about the external environment, you have to understand your uh, external vendors, partners, client environment. Once you have understood that, you have to understand the data flow that we have already talked about. Once you have been able to understand about the data flow, the third piece is that, let's say if an attacker gets an access to your client environment and he uses their set of systems in order to attack your environment, how are you going to protect that, right? So you need to do some kind of a continuous monitoring of your systems and applications, right? So you need to see that, okay, the whatever traffic is hitting your environment, right? You are able to understand that, okay, this is a legitimate traffic versus a non-legitimate traffic, and how your systems or environment is equipped in order to handle that. Okay, so for that you need to do some kind of a methodology where you are doing a continuous monitoring of your system. So there are a lot of solutions which are there today in the market which helps you in terms of detecting that, okay, your IP addresses are vulnerable to these following attacks, and this is how you can actually in terms of overcome that, right? The second piece which is very, very important and becoming very critical today is doing a vulnerability assessment, right? Today, let's say if in case because of any XYZ reason, because of any changes to my environment, my administrator have left some kind of a loophole in my system. Okay. Now, what will happen because of that due to any change? An attacker have an opportunity because these attackers are using best of the technologies. They are using the best of the solution in order to continuously crawl your environment, right? So what they will be able to do is they will be able to identify that, okay, this particular organization have a vulnerable system, which is like this port has been open, and we can easily go ahead and do an attack on this organization, right? So what you need to do is to immediately, because if you do a legacy vulnerability assessment today, you may be able to identify this gap after a period of, let's say, 1 quarter, because once you have done a vulnerability assessment for a specific quarter, obviously you will initiate that exercise probably after a quarter, right? So the gap still remains in your environment, right? Now you need to bridge these gaps, right? If you are able to bridge the gaps within a within a stipulated time, obviously the window of an attacker get reduced, right? He will have a very less of a time in order to really penetrate into your organization, because he will also need to understand the environment, the kind of systems that are open, and then he will actually weaponize his set of tools in order to actually attack. But if you reduce that window, obviously you cannot reduce it to zero immediately because it will take some time to in order to mitigate that. But if you are able to reduce that to a specific number, let's say within 30 minutes, I'll be able to bridge that. This will help you in terms of protecting your organization, right? So that's another area which needs to be looked into, because if you are able to do a continuous vulnerability assessment on the systems and infrastructure in order to come up mitigate these gaps, right, you will be able to effectively low down the attack ratio on your organization infrastructure. So that's another second important piece. So there are a lot of other again solutions which you can actually into utilize in terms of, again, that solutions may be cost effective for some organizations. They might not be cost effective. Again, the decision is entirely upon the organization in terms of what budget they have, what kind of an ROI that they see on the investment of that particular product and solution. But I think that's the another solution that I feel is very, very optimistic in terms of really bridging some of those gaps. I think the third important piece, which is very important, and in the given scenario today, we have been struggling, is to measure the control environments, right? So we talked about the external environment, their measurement. We talked about the infrastructure, which is your systems, where the traffic is hitting. So you need to put some controls to in order to manage that. The third important piece is to do a internal review. Now, as an organization, today what we used to do is we used to do risk assessment, which is ISO 27001 risk assessment, or any other risk assessment for given by the standards. Now, these assessments primarily are very qualitative in nature, right? Because it's a discussion based. Yeah. Okay. And while we are discussing some of these pieces, the interpretation of the control, the impact may vary from stakeholder to stakeholder, right? So even if you have done a qualitative risk assessment, the output that you may be anticipating from these stakeholders may not give you the real set of comfort. You may not be able to bring out the right set of risk for your organization. So the thought process is that the qualitative is good, but what you need to add is the quantitative risk analysis on top of it. Now, the quantitative will help you in terms of understanding the risk in terms of numbers. It will help you in terms of calculating the financial impact. It will help you in terms of understanding the return of investment on your control that you're putting. It will help you in terms of measuring the control environment. So that's become even more critical. So the third piece that you can do as an organization is that you should expand your risk assessment, not from only the qualitative, but to the quantitative route. Again, as an organization, our thought process has been that, okay, if in case there is any major change that happens, then probably we'll do a qualitative risk analysis, right? Or if in case, as per requirement of the standard, we'll go ahead and do an annual risk assessment on that. I think the approach should be that once you have done a qualitative risk analysis for, let's say, based on the annual requirement, the quantitative risk assessment should be performed on a quarterly basis. Why? Because your risks are evolving, your adversaries are evolving, right? So in order to manage that, you need to continuously address the challenges that are coming for your organization and effectively build up a roadmap. So let's say today, if my focus is vendor risk management, okay, and I have been able to plug some of the issues through the controls that we talked about initially, I think my second important piece would be some other area, right? So now the application, if I see that, let's say the application which are receiving some of this traffic, which we talked about in the second control, if we see that there are vulnerabilities which are existing there, then the that may become a set of risk for me. Now I need to address that, and to address that, I need to see if in case what is the value that I should put in for the organization, what is the ROI that it will bring if in case I have to close that gap, right? And if in case I have to do some kind of an investment. So that quantitative risk analysis, if we are doing it on a quarter basis, it will help us to understand what is the maturity of my organization, how the maturity is going to help me in terms of overcoming the risk, and if in case there is an investment which is there which has to be put in, how that investment is helping my organization. So it's very important to undergo some of these pieces. The fourth thought process that I have, and I think it is very, very critical today, given the set of environment that we are living in, I think is we have so many solutions. So many solutions means 45 to 50 solutions. And these are going through SOX, NOC, independent solutions. It is becoming very, very difficult to manage it on the ground. We have a DLP team who is monitoring the traffic which is coming on from the DLP. Any violation, they manage it. We have a firewall team which is looking at the logs which is coming. We have a security operations center which is collating some of the traffic which is coming through these firewalls. They are looking at the server infrastructure and the network infrastructure. But we do not today have a holistic solution which looks at each of these solutions in one single go, rather than looking at them independently. Okay, there is something called as cyber analytics, and it is very, very important today. Why? Because it addresses the challenges of not only looking at each of these solutions and the output holistically as a combined solution, but it also tells you based on the correlation engine that you develop, based on the input that is receiving, and based on the information that is been there in that system, if it is better able to understand the traffic, the inputs which are coming in, it will be able to provide you some meaningful information. Yeah, it will help you in able to identify and alert very, very effectively. It will help you in terms of monitoring and closing some of the gaps very, very closely. uh, like we talked about, inputs of the output of the solution one, right? The control one, which is like in understanding the vendor environment. You are looking at it independently. The environment, the output of the solution two, which is the network infrastructure and the server infrastructure, the IP addresses, the control which you are looking there, you are looking at them independently. But if in case, let's say there is a vendor attack, when a system which is emanating an attack from vendor system, and is coming into your firewall, right? Is coming and hitting your firewall. If we are able to detect that effectively within the time, I think we'll be in a very well position in order to mitigate some of those pieces, right? But if you look at them independently, continue to look at them independently, the team A may take time in order to communicate that to team B. And by the time the team A communicates to team B, the damage is already done. So it's important that we have certain solutions. It's not necessary that we need to invest a lot of money. There are a lot of open sources solutions which are there available. All we need to do is to integrate the output of these sources into those. How are you going to uh, understand the information? How will you normalize? How will you parse the information? What is the kind of correlation that you want? What are the set of use cases that you feel are important from your organization perspective? And what is the value that you feel are important that the solution brings to you as an output, which you may like to monitor and remediate, right? So the this solution, the fourth, is something which is organization centric, which can be driven specifically by the organization. Even the third solution that we talked about, the cyber risk quantification, there are a lot of methodologies, framework today which exist in the market, which as an organization you do not need to procure a solution effectively. You can use those methodologies in order to build. But if in case you adopt some, there are a lot of innovative products today which actually take input from a lot of these adversaries. So they also incorporate inputs of the adversaries, right, into their solution. So they may bring more rich information to you. But if in case you are able to build the fourth one, which is the cyber analytics, and you are able to build up some use cases around that, you will be better equipped in terms of handling some of the challenges. So in primarily, if you have to, again, as I talked about, two of the controls which we talked about externally, which is from an external environment, looking at the vendors, partners, the contractors, which are there existing. Two controls which you can put in, which can help you in terms of protecting your external environment. Two controls that you can put from an organizational perspective, which can help you in terms of bridging your internal environment. The fifth important piece, which is, I think, again, has to go as a very, very critical input into your entire solution base, is the human-centric behavior. How your employees are behaving, what kind of an access that they are doing, right? What kind of an email that they are reading, right? That also have to be integrated into your cyber analytics platform, because that's the key. That's the key. If you are conducting a training for your employees, right? If you are training them in terms of on various parameters of information security, which is from a software development perspective, or you are telling them as to how do they need to behave while they are accessing data center, or you're talking about how do they need to actually behave in terms of when managing the cloud environment. These training have to also be integral part of your entire platform, because these are going to be your defining force, right? These are, so people, process, and technology. Your cyber analytics platform cannot only depend on technology and processes. It has to be a combination of all three critical elements, which is your people, process, and technology. So until unless you have not created a robust environment for yourself, the challenges which are there may still continue to persist, and you may still have all those issues. So again, there is no silver bullet. You, for specific issues, specific challenges, you have to build controls, you have to address them, and accordingly you have to move ahead. So this has to be part of a journey rather than a one-stop solution, which is that, okay, with this kind of a control environment, I am going to just go ahead and start investing into XYZ, and this will help me in terms of protecting. No, first you need to develop a roadmap. You have to start with the basics, start with A, and then plan to move till Z. And that should be ideally your approach in terms of moving ahead.
For more updates from CXO TV, please like and subscribe to our channel.